It's been exactly 30 years. 30 years ago today, October 25th, Ronald Reagan sent U.S. forces into Grenada. Now, prior to this, just on March 13th, 1979, Maurice Bishop had taken over that island and that island nation. And as Stephen Zunes writes over at Truthout, in the next 4 years, while most Caribbean nations suffered terribly from worldwide recession, Grenada achieved a 9% cumulative growth rate. Unemployment dropped from 49 to 14%. The government diversified agriculture, developed co-ops, created an agri-industrial base that led to the reduction of the percentage of food and total imports from 40% to 28%. The literacy rate went up to 98%. Free healthcare and secondary education systems were established. Number of secondary schools was tripled, and scores of Grenadians receiving scholarships for studies abroad were established. Plus, the fishing industry, handicrafts, housing, tourism, expansion of roads and transportation system, upgraded public utilities. All of this was just way too much for Ronnie Reagan and his free marketeers and the billionaires who were supporting him. With us now is an old friend and just absolutely one of the most brilliant people I know, Don Rojas, who was the former press secretary to the late Prime Minister of Grenada, Maurice Bishop. And Don, welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. How are you doing, my brother?
I am fine. It is so great to have you with us. First of all, am I pronouncing Grenada right?
You are pronouncing Grenada right. You're absolutely correct. It's not Granada.
Okay.
Not the city in Spain. It's Grenada, yes.
Okay. Right. So if you want to add to or correct anything I said in the setup, please do so.
Everything you said was absolutely accurate. During the 4.5 years that the Maurice Bishop government was in power, it did achieve some pretty remarkable economic successes, and the quality of life for the people of Grenada, began to surge forward, coming out of long years of, first of all, slavery, and followed by British colonialism, and then followed by, after independence, a series of corrupt governments, quasi-dictatorships, that ruled the country right up until 1979, when Maurice Bishop and his group of young revolutionaries overthrew the dictatorship and established a popular democracy in Grenada in 1979, March 1979.
So here we have a popular democracy that is, radically dropping unemployment, reducing poverty, increasing literacy. Why did Reagan invade?
Well, Reagan invaded because Grenada was becoming a beacon, a symbol of hope for people throughout the Caribbean region. The people of other countries in the Eastern Caribbean, from Jamaica in the north all the way down to Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana, they were observing very keenly this experiment in social transformation led by a popular progressive government, and they were seeing tangible results.
This was a democratic socialist government. This wasn't a full-out Castro-communist.
Reagan then declared war, literally, before they invaded in Grenada in October of '83. The Reagan administration carried out a campaign of destabilization on many different fronts: economic, political, diplomatic destabilization, to try to discredit the regime in the eyes of the people in Grenada. But all of that failed. And, I think what triggered the invasion was the growing close relations between Maurice Bishop and his government and the Cuban government. And Reagan vowed that they would, under his watch, there would never be another Cuba emerging in the Western Hemisphere. He even described Grenada as a Marxist virus, and a virus that needed to be stamped out. And so, he was fortunate in the sense that a number of events that took place in Grenada leading up to the invasion created a pretext for Reagan to then move in and with massive military force, over 7,000 Marines and U.S. paratroopers and Navy SEALs and the whole nine. I mean, I lived through it. I saw up close and personal the ugly face of imperialism. And it's but some of us survived and we moved on. And 30 years later, of course, when we reflect on those memories, it becomes a very sad day for for those of us who survived.
Yeah. Grenada now, yeah, I've been to Grenada just as a tourist. I mean, Louise and I were on a cruise ship that stopped there, and I remember the Nutmeg Cafe and very, very good rum drinks, but that's about it.
Right.
But it seemed like a very poor island when we were there. Has the potential that Maurice Bishop started?
Well, unfortunately, following the invasion, Grenada saw a number of pretty backward right-wing or center-right governments came to power with the support of Washington. There is such a government in place right now, and not doing a whole lot to improve the economy. In fact, currently the Grenadian economy is in a shambles. They owe massive amounts of debt to the IMF and the World Bank. So much debt, in fact, that the Grenada Council of Churches, which is one of the more active civil society groupings in the country, has called on the government not to honor the IMF debt because it is crushing the people of the country.
Right.
And so here you have a pro-U.S. regime that is currently in power. In fact, the current prime minister was an active opponent of Maurice Bishop back 30 years ago. He was always considered a favorite of Washington. He was in power for a while, and then he lost elections, and now the elections of last year he's returned to power. But there's a lot of corruption in the government, a lot of mismanagement of the economy, and things are pretty dismal for the people of Grenada right now.
Yeah. Now, Reagan's invasion of Grenada followed Maggie Thatcher's taking the Falklands and turned her into a heroine. I mean, the economy had essentially crashed under Thatcher-Reaganomics, in the first couple of years.
Yes.
And it was a great distraction for Maggie Thatcher. To what extent do you think Reagan did this little invasion just to get his numbers up? Because they did bounce his numbers back up.
It did bounce his numbers back, and here he was right after Grenada talking about America standing tall again in the world and flexing its muscle. You may recall that the week before he invaded Grenada, you had this horrible bombing in Lebanon, in Beirut, Lebanon, terrorist bombing that killed over 200 U.S. Marines, and so that too was a pretext for him to flex military muscle in a region of the world that the United States has always considered its backyard. I'm talking about the Caribbean and Latin American region.
Right. So he basically turned tail and ran out of Lebanon and deflected attention away from that by invading this little tiny country down in the Caribbean.
Yeah, I mean, it was a reverse David and Goliath kind of situation. I mean, here you had the most formidable military power in the world invading one of the smallest and one of the poorest countries in the world. I mean, Grenada has a little over 100,000 people. Invaded by a 7,000-plus military force.
Whoa!
Proportionally, someone ran some numbers the other day. I found it to be a fascinating statistic. They said proportionally, it would take an army of 20 million to invade the United States.
Wow! Wow! Incredible. Don Rojas, the former press secretary to the late Prime Minister of Grenada, Maurice Bishop. And Don was there 30 years ago today when Ronnie Reagan invaded Grenada. Don, thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thanks, Tom, for remembering Grenada on this occasion.
It's my pleasure, and always great talking with you, Don. We'll be back.